Welcome to Caribbean Classics Day, sponsored by Hodder Education. I am James Nalfos and I will be your moderator. I hope you enjoy listening to some of the excerpts of Hodder Caribbean Classics. Do not hesitate to get a copy of your favorite Hodder text. The novel entitled Escape to Last Man Peak was written by a Jamaican author, Jean DaCosta. In 2 weeks, we should have had Christmas, if the sickness had not come. 10 children are left to fend for themselves when the matron of their orphanage dies in the pneumonia epidemic that is raging through Jamaica. Afraid they'll be made to work in the labor camp, they decide to escape to the other side of the island. The perilous journey to Last Man Peak, with only their wits and courage to help them, was to change their lives forever. This tale traces their difficult and dangerous journey to reach Last Man Peak. An excerpt of this novel will be read by Dr. Fiona Meyer. Dr. Meyer is the Chief Education Officer in the Department of Education, Innovation, and Gender Relations. She's a passionate educator of 31 years, and it is an honor to work with children and all other stakeholders within the education sector. Have you ever encountered a dangerous or difficult experience?
Chapter 2, Bess. We met no one, not even a cow for the first mile or so. The air was chilly, but fresh and sweet, and the stars were white and shining in the deep sky. We soon forgot about the burning town and the policemen and the labor camp. In 2 weeks, we should have had Christmas, if the sickness hadn't come. Pauline and Sylvia hummed a carol, and Pet and Precious walked smartly in time, hanging on to Pauline's hands. Quite suddenly the sky turned grey, the palest blue, and the birds twittered in the bushes. Following a plan of Jimmy's and Gerald's, we were walking along the line of Mr. Henry's land, keeping away from the road. The farmer's house was on a hill that stood up alone out of the plain, its stony slopes covered with cactus and scrubs. Jimmy told us to wait for him at the foot of the hill, down in the hollow place screened from the driveway by the thick bougainvillea hedge. He and Gerald took off their packs and began to climb up the hillside near to the drive, where they would hide behind rocks and bushes if need be. They soon disappeared from sight, and some of the little ones began to fuss. Pet was sleepy and put her hand in Miner's lap. Frankie, of course, wanted some of the fruit and tried to take away Vasvas's pack. Pauline got hold of the pack and she and I sat on it while Sylvia and Vasvas grabbed at Frankie. We were all making a lot of noise, and Frankie was yelling at the top of his voice when Precious ran up to Pauline and cried, "Look at the car!" We had forgotten the policeman's words completely, and there, followed by a huge plume of dust, was a large van making straight up for us along the road. "Lie down!" cried Pauline, but everyone was already flat on the ground. It seemed certain that they would see us from the van, but the ground was uneven and dotted with bushes. Then, just where the road swept round a wide curve that would have brought the driver of the van right before us, the hedge rose up between us and the road, barring the way. The van roared past. Even Pauline, who had tried to get a good look, had been unable to see it properly. We were safe for the moment. "Come on, all of you," Pauline whispered. "Come from here. They might see us from the corner of the drive up there." The driveway wound round the hill, and there was a sharp corner above us from which we could easily be seen by everyone walking on the drive and looking over the low hill that ran along it. Further down in the hollow was a large apple tree, its dense glossy foliage a perfect hiding place. We climbed quickly, handing the packs up to Vasvas, who climbed right up to the top. We waited in the apple tree for a long and uncomfortable time, brushing off the stinging ants that were busy all over the branches, rubbing the bites we received, trying to find places to sit. We could no longer see Gerald or Jimmy. dead silence fell after the van drew up by the house on the hilltop. Just when we were getting alarmed by the stillness and Pet had started to cry again, there was a sudden uproar of barking and shouting, and the van started up and soon came roaring down the drive. Thus of us who had decided to follow Jimmy and Gerald got back up to the tree just in time. The van made off down the road in a cloud of dust. "What's keeping them so long?" grumbled Sylvia. "I'm coming down now and whatever happened?" Mina and the twins scrambled down the tree after her, and the rest of us followed. Frankie fell out of the tree with a thud and knocked me down. By the time I picked myself up and Pauline was brushing us off, Vas looked up and saw Gerald coming down the hill. "He's all right, Pauline. See them coming now," he cried. But Gerald had disappeared again by the time we looked round. We had to wait almost 10 minutes more before they returned, and Jimmy told us what the van was and what was happening in Mr. Henry's house. He said it was important and that all of us had to hear about it, but he never liked talking about it after that day. He said that after they had left us, he and Gerald had climbed up almost to the house when they saw the dust on the road below them and heard the sound of the approaching van. It was easier for them to hide as the hill was strewn with stones and boulders, and there was a sort of quarry on one side where they would lie concealed from view. Jimmy made Gerald stay behind, just in case, and then crept up as near as he dared to the wall that rimmed the driveway. The van screeched to a stop, and there was a short silence. Then heavy footsteps made their way to the front of the house, and someone knocked on it loudly. Presently, he heard the footsteps moving further away, and the sound of breaking glass. A man's voice called out. Jimmy could not make out what was said, but he knew it was not Mr. Henry's voice. At this, someone else got out of the van and slammed the door, and both sets of footsteps faded away. In the silence, Jimmy felt bolder. He wanted to see the van if he could, so he crawled inch by inch up the bank and peeped over the wall. He saw a large van of a kind we all knew well in the days before the sickness. On the side was the picture of a laughing woman holding a fat baby. The picture was framed in a garland of red and yellow flowers, and big green letters spelled out, "Farm milk babies are best." But now, a hastily painted red cross covered the baby's face and most of the flowers. It was an ambulance. Just then, he heard shouts from the back of the house and the loud, angry barking of a dog. Footsteps rang on the paved yard, and he ducked just in time as the two men ran back to the van. He heard them climb in and slammed the door hastily, and the next moment there was a hideous noise of snarling and barking and growling right below his head. The engine started with a roar, and with a screech of tires, the van was turned into the yard. "I wish I could shoot the dog," said a voice as the engine noise dropped to a murmur. "Climb up and put the sign on that post. I don't think it can reach you." There was loud cursing and much barking, and then the engine revved up again, and the van set off down the hill. Jimmy waited until he could see it down in the distant plain before he called Gerald, and they both climbed cautiously up to the wall. "What about the dog? I'm afraid," said Gerald. He had never been on friendly terms with her. "She knows me," said Jimmy briefly. They stared at the house, locked up and strangely empty looking. The dog was lying on the veranda in the front of the door, and high up on the pillar at the entrance to the porch was a large notice hastily nailed. "Don't follow me yet," said Jimmy, and walked slowly up to the veranda. The dog stood up as he stepped over the wall. It was jet black and even larger than Gerald remembered. In fact, it was quite the largest dog he had ever seen. It seemed huge, as big as a calf, he thought. "Hello, Bess," said Jimmy. "Bess, never mind. Good dog, good dog. Remember me?" She wagged her tail and came forward. Jimmy stood still, and Gerald held his breath. Bess sniffed Jimmy carefully and then gave his hand a tiny lick. "Okay, Gerald," called Jimmy. "You can come now. Just let her smell you and walk slow." Bess came right up to the terrified Gerald. He said afterwards he was too frightened to run anyway, and licked his hand with a large wet tongue. Then she went back to her place by the door, whimpering a little. "Look at this," cried Jimmy, who had climbed up to the veranda railing to read the notice. "Condemned by health authority," it read out. "This house and its contents to be destroyed by the order of the health authority under the Epidemic Act." "Oh, somebody died in here. Mr. Henry must be dead." At the sound of her master's name, Bess whined more loudly and scratched at the door with her paw. "Let's leave, Jimmy," begged Gerald. "Wait, don't you smell something cooking?" Bess sprang up and ran to the back of the house, and the boys followed. Sure enough, a most entrancing, appetizing smell was coming from somewhere. The dog led them to what obviously was a kitchen, where she vanished through a hole cut low down in the door. It was a bit awkward for Gerald, but Jimmy crammed in somehow, and he unbolted the door from inside. Jess paid them no attention, but ran along a dim passageway to scratch at the door beyond. Jimmy followed her swiftly, shouting to Gerald to look around the kitchen for something useful. He paused at the closed door, which Bess was now assaulting with all the strength of a Labrador Alsatian ancestry. Jimmy, Pauline, Sylvia, and Gerald and I had been in Mr. Henry's house many times, but never as far as the bedrooms. He guessed that this must be the bedroom used by Mr. Henry and his wife, and suddenly the meaning of the official notice hit him with full force. He said he had never really thought about anything could happen to Mr. Henry. Even the men in the van had not alarmed him. He had sure felt that they were busybodies, mean and stupid like the policeman, scared of a dog and a lonely house. Matron's warnings came rushing back to his mind, but he couldn't turn away. Suddenly, Bess' attacks on the doors stopped, and she gave a sharp, joyful bark. Her ears pricked forward. They both listened. Then, very small, so small, the voice came again. "Come in," it said. "Open the door." Jimmy turned the handle, and Bess rushed into the room. "Wait," said the voice. The room was quite dark, but Jimmy could make out a figure propped up in bed. "Jimmy Anderson?" The weak voice was Mr. Henry's. "Yes, sir," answered Jimmy. "Stay out there, Jimmy. Don't come any further." There was a pause as he struggled for breath. "Tell me first, is true the hospital burned down?" "Yes." There was a long silence. Jimmy thought that the farmer must have fallen asleep or fainted. Then, in almost his normal voice, Mr. Henry said, "Jimmy, I know you for a real responsible fellow." No one had ever called him that before. "I can depend on you. I have the sickness, and I'm going to die in this bed right here. I don't mind that. It's not so bad. And my wife was in the hospital." Jimmy understood. In the kitchen, the voice went on faintly. I started to cook while I had the strength. Take what you find. Wash everything with disinfectant. The food that is in tins or still cooking can't hurt you if you put it in something clean. Take care. You must be well hungry down there. But, began Jimmy. Don't worry, said Mr. Henry. I know what I'm doing. Take all you can carry. But there is something else. Jimmy waited. I won't get up again. All I need is water, and I have it here, beside me. I put everything there when I took them sick. I was just waiting to hear my wife. I don't have to wait any longer. Go down to the pasture for me and let out all the cows. They can walk and find water. A fit of coughing shook him. Bess, the dog sat up and put one paw on the bed. I give her to you. I wouldn't give her to anybody else, and I wouldn't shoot her. Bess, the voice grew louder. Bess, go to Jimmy. The dog whimpered. Come on, Bess. I want you to watch him for me. Very reluctantly, the dog went to Jimmy, looking back to the bed and whining. Guard, Bess. Follow him. Jimmy rubbed her head gently. Tie her up at night, said Mr. Henry. Don't let her come back. Pet her a lot, but I don't have to tell you that. She will look after you well. If I get better, you can come and look for me. If not, the two of you must take care of each other. I think I will sleep, so shut the door now for me. Almost before he realized it, Jimmy found himself out of the bedroom in the dark passage. He hesitated and raised his hand once more to the handle. Bess nudged him with her muzzle, and he turned away bewildered and sad. In the kitchen, Gerald had not been idle. Cupboards stood open, and Gerald was standing on a chair in order to reach a row of jars on a high shelf. What happened? Asked Gerald. See anybody? Yes, answered Jimmy. He didn't want to talk about the strange conversation in the darkened bedroom. Mr. Henry is here. He says we must take some food, and he gave me Bess, and we must let out the cows for him. We better hurry up now. Gerald began to protest, but Jimmy told him to find a disinfectant and helped him pack what they were to take. On the stove was a large pot of rice and guma peas, rather burnt at the bottom and still hot. Jimmy found a large lunch carrier with 3 large enamel pans and made Gerald wash it carefully. The rice and peas filled 2 of the containers, but the good smell came from the oven, which Jimmy turned off before opening it. Inside was a small ham sitting in a tin basin. It was very hot to handle, but Jimmy was determined to take it. They stood looking at it, licking burnt fingers and wondering what to do when Gerald saw a lid in the sink. They washed that carefully and fitted it over the pan, after which Jimmy wrapped the whole thing in newspaper and tied it with string. It was a bit warm to the touch, but not impossible to carry. There was little else in the farmer's kitchen. 3 eggs in a bowl were rejected as too much trouble, but they took 2 small jars of honey and jam Gerald had found.
We hope you have enjoyed this edition of Caribbean Classics Day, sponsored by Hodder Education. For more of this titled and many others, visit hoddereducation.co.uk. Stay tuned for our next episode. Please remain safe and set aside time to engage in reading. I am Jameson Alphos, saying goodbye for now.